Mr. Cosby, any comments, sir?
Bill Cosby in handcuffs. The man once known as America's dad is tonight labeled a violent sexual predator. Cosby becomes the first celebrity sentenced to prison in the Me Too era. At a time when women's claims are increasingly heard and believed, Donald Trump is not exactly on board, not when it comes to accusations against his Supreme Court nominee, saying the latest woman to come forward was drunk and, quote, all messed up. So has anything actually changed?
Also tonight, the Humboldt crash renewed a call for seatbelts on buses, why some players aren't willing to buckle up.
And the day after an election in New Brunswick, why it's still unclear who gets to govern. This is The National. What was once inconceivable is now hard fact. Bill Cosby is behind bars. The superstar entertainer, formerly revered, was sentenced today to 3 to 10 years in jail for drugging and raping a Toronto woman, Andrea Constant. The 81-year-old was transferred to a Pennsylvania jail right after sentencing. His first task as a state felon, taking this mugshot.
But now finally, Bill Cosby has been unmasked, and we have seen the real man as he is headed off to prison.
That powerful image speaks profoundly to his fall from grace, from TV star and trailblazing comedian to cuffed convict and even public threat. The judge refused to grant bail during the appeal, saying Cosby could quite possibly be a danger to the community. Cosby himself said nothing as the sentence was handed down, but outside there were triumphant declarations from self-described victims of Cosby who never got their own day in court, though 5 did testify.
I'm very happy to know that Mr. Cosby will do time in prison, that he is touchable like he touched us, unwillingly.
Then a dramatic turn as publicists for Cosby denounced the entire proceeding.
This has been the most racist and sexist trial in the history of the United States.
They said Cosby's history of philanthropy was never considered by the jury and that a key piece of evidence, a secret audio recording of Cosby, had been tampered with. Prosecutors ignored the allegation, focusing on the victory and the victim, Canadian Andrea Constant, assaulted by her friend and mentor at his gated estate in Philadelphia 14 years ago.
Let me talk about Andrea for a moment here. I can't say enough about her. She has been through an ordeal these past 14 years, and she has been solid and steadfast.
Constant was there, said nothing, but her 5-page victim impact statement released today spoke volumes. Bill Cosby took my beautiful, healthy young spirit and crushed it. We may never know the full extent of his double life as a sexual predator, but his decades-long reign of terror as a serial rapist is over. The criminal case against Cosby was launched in 2015, so it predates the tidal wave of accusations against entertainment titans like Harvey Weinstein. But many see today's sentencing as the first legal triumph of the Me Too era. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson looks at what it will mean for other victims.
You will suffer the consequences if you are convicted in a court of law of drugging and assaulting a woman.
Not just a victory for Bill Cosby's accusers, but potentially an inspiration for others wary of voicing their own complaints. For many who follow the Cosby trial, today's sentencing sends a strong and powerful message.
A big part of this is the message it gives the victims. Because if nobody is going to take you seriously, why go through all the pain of reliving this event? I think there's a sense of it's no longer okay for somebody with a lot of celebrity and power to just sexually prey on people.
Is Bill Cosby coming?
That a man can be brought down from that height and sentenced to time in state prison will likely have an impact even here in Canada.
The Bill Cosby case is significant because it's the first real case in the Me Too era to go to trial, to result in convictions, and now we have a sentencing.
Flora Weinberg, who specializes in civil sexual assault cases, says she's already had more people approach her with their own stories.
It will really inspire people to come forward and feel like, in addition to the cultural watershed and the shift in social perspective about sexual assault, there will be a similar shift in criminal proceedings where perhaps complainants will be at least believed and given a fair day in court.
In Canada, only 12% of reported sexual assaults result in convictions, and only 7% of accused ever go to prison. But for now, there's reason for cautious optimism. Some see the Cosby sentence as a harbinger of celebrities facing the same kind of justice as anyone else. The next test for Me Too, Harvey Weinstein appears in court November 8th. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
It's impossible for sound bites and brief descriptions to get across the gravity of a sexual assault. So we want to bring you more of Andrea Constand's victim impact statement, where she describes in her own words how the assault forever changed her career and her life. At the time of the assault, I was 30 years old and a fit, confident athlete. I was strong and skilled with great reflexes, agility, and speed. I had just given my 2-month notice at Temple University when the man I'd come to know as a mentor and friend drugged and sexually assaulted me. Instead of being able to run, jump, and pretty much do anything I wanted physically, during the assault, I was paralyzed and completely helpless. I could not move my arms or legs. I couldn't speak or even remain conscious. I was completely vulnerable and powerless to protect myself. When the sexual assault happened, I was a young woman brimming with confidence and looking forward to a future bright with possibilities. Now, almost 15 years later, I'm a middle-aged woman who's been stuck in a holding pattern for most of her adult life, unable to heal fully or to move forward. The landmark sentence comes in a big week for the Me Too movement. Brett Kavanaugh and a woman accusing him of a decades-old sexual assault will testify Thursday. Donald Trump today taking a strong new defense of his Supreme Court pick, taking aim at a second accuser who alleged Kavanaugh exposed himself at a drunken party at Yale decades ago. Ellen Morrow has more on the president's sharpening tone.
I think he's just a wonderful human being. I mean, I think it's horrible what the Democrats have done. It's a con game they're playing.
President Trump unleashing another attack on the Democrats and going even further against one of Brett Kavanaugh's accusers, calling her all messed up and inebriated.
The second accuser has nothing. The second accuser doesn't even know. She thinks maybe it could have been him, maybe not. She admits that she was drunk. She admits time lapses. There were time lapses.
A smear campaign, character assassination.
It's a defense playing out across Washington, conservative groups spending millions of dollars to pressure senators to vote yes on the embattled nominee.
Kavanaugh says categorically he wasn't there.
But will it be enough? Assuming all Democrats go against Kavanaugh, Republicans can only afford to lose one vote. And all eyes are on senators who voted against their party in the past.
Should there be a full FBI investigation into these allegations from Kavanaugh's past?
One of them is Alaska's Lisa Murkowski.
Are you still undecided?
Another one to watch is Susan Collins.
I am. How could I decide before hearing the testimony of Professor Ford?
This is a high-quality person.
But the president will continue to pile on the pressure, describing a failure to confirm Kavanaugh like this.
It would be a horrible insult to our country if this doesn't happen.
Tonight, the Judiciary Committee said it could hold the first vote on Kavanaugh's confirmation as early as Friday morning, just 24 hours after hearing from Christine Blasey Ford. The move has incensed Democrats who accuse Republicans of not caring about her testimony and instead trying to rush through Kavanaugh's confirmation ahead of the midterm elections. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
A little later, we'll look at the other comments Donald Trump made at the UN. Was the world laughing with him or at him?
And as political leaders fight over who will lead New Brunswick, we ask what the new political landscape says about the state of that province.
But first, there's a new push tonight to get hockey players to buckle up in the wake of the Humboldt bus crash. Could seatbelts have reduced the number and severity of injuries? Now that it's hockey season, junior teams are again on the buses, and at least one league is urging players to buckle up for the Broncos. But as Olivia Stefanovic explains, for some, that is a tough sell.
Another hockey season arrives, and the Humboldt Broncos are back on board with some new instructions from their league president.
check their egos at the bus door and go and sit down and put your seatbelt on.
The Broncos are still using the same bus company involved in the deadly crash 6 months ago. Its buses have lap belts, but it's not clear how many passengers, if any, were wearing them at the time of the collision, even though it's the law. The problem? Many players don't see the need to buckle up.
Because like a lot of guys lay down on the seats and be pretty uncomfortable, so I don't think anybody would really wear them a whole lot.
That's an attitude Russell Harold wants to change.
If you were wearing your seatbelt, could have it made a difference? Could have it made a difference to save one life in that bus? You know, if it saved one life, does that not make a difference? That means something to anyone?
His son Adam was less than a week away from his 17th birthday when he was killed in the Broncos crash. Russell Harold thinks wearing seatbelts could have changed the outcome.
And it's something that needs to change. You never used to wear a seatbelt in your car, and you do now, and it's just something that's going to have to change on these buses.
Transport Canada is making seatbelts mandatory on highway buses by 2020, but that only applies to new models, and it will continue to be up to provinces to enforce. Olivia Stevanovic, CBC News, Regina.
So as Olivia mentioned, enforcing seatbelt laws on buses is a provincial responsibility. Most require they be used if the vehicle has them. All newly built highway buses will soon be required to have seatbelts. School buses are exempt, and you might be surprised to learn the Canada Safety Council says that seatbelts wouldn't improve safety. School buses are designed and built differently than highway buses. To New Brunswick now, where politics have suddenly shifted in a way perhaps no one expected. Not just because of the first minority government in nearly a century, but that narrow gap between the two parties that could lead, a single seat. So the sitting Premier Liberal leader Brian Gallant visited the Lieutenant Governor today looking for support to form a government.
She has granted us the opportunity to face the legislature to see if we can maintain the confidence of the House.
But Progressive Conservative leader Blaine Higgs says that's not the message he received from the Lieutenant Governor's office.
I hear you. And I would like to just get on with it. And I think all this is doing is prolonging the inevitable, really.
So New Brunswickers left with a lot of questions about their province's future. The PCs and Liberals both want to form the government, and there are two other parties that will play a role in that. Here's a brief on what happens next in this deadlock.
The Lieutenant Governor has just confirmed we are still the government and I am still the Premier.
That's true for now, but the results from last night mean the Liberals may not govern for long. You need 25 for a majority. The Progressive Conservatives won the most seats last night, 22. The Liberals got 21. And the two other parties, the Greens and the People's Alliance, each got 3. In a parliamentary system, when no party has a majority, the one that was in power gets the first chance to form a government, even if it didn't win the most seats. So Brian Gallant will try to get the confidence of a majority of MLAs, and that means the Liberals need to get at least 4 members of other parties on his side. That could be done through a formal coalition or an agreement to work together for a set period of time. That's what happened in BC last year when the NDP signed a deal with the Greens. Or the Liberals would need to get enough support issue by issue. The key test, the throne speech. If Gallant doesn't win that vote, then the PCs would likely get a chance to form government, but it too would need to broker a deal with the other parties. If not, New Brunswickers could soon be back at the polls. If the results and the process seem confusing, the overall sentiment from New Brunswick voters was clear. The CBC's Kayla Hounsell explains.
After asking the Lieutenant Governor for permission to continue governing the province, Liberal leader Brian Gallant did seem resigned to the facts.
I humbly accept the very strong message New Brunswickers sent last night.
A strong message indeed.
People want to change.
Today, New Brunswickers are surprised and confused about what's to come, but generally pleased they've sent 4 parties to the legislature.
People want them to work together.
This is New Brunswick's first minority government in almost a century. The province has traditionally elected a Liberal or Conservative majority government.
Someone could have thrown a stun grenade into the room and I wouldn't have been more surprised.
Michael Camp has been involved in the coverage of every election campaign here for the past 35 years.
Majority this way, majority that way, broken promises, upset, and it seems like we've been in this back and forth, no forward motion trap for a long time.
This time, voters also elected 3 Green Party candidates and 3 from the People's Alliance, a right-leaning party best known for its language policies in Canada's only officially bilingual province.
What came forward was the language issue, and that has been embedded in New Brunswick politics from the very beginning.
The predominantly francophone ridings in the province's north went mostly Liberal. The opposite was true for the Anglophone ridings in the south. Under both major parties, the population and job opportunities have shrunk, and the province's finances are dire. A recent Auditor General report declared getting a handle on this problem will be like turning the Titanic.
Smarten up and use the money wisely.
And there are many frustrated voters.
There are a lot of people who are generally dissatisfied with having maybe 1 or 2 large actors who deal with things.
So what was one of the last remaining 2-party political systems in Canada is splintered, and New Brunswickers have opened the door to new ideas. Kayla Hounsel, CBC News, Fredericton.
To New York now, where U.S. President Donald Trump did not get the reaction he was going for today when he addressed the United Nations General Assembly. It's not that he said a lot that is new. It was his usual tough talk on Iran and the rejection of globalization. But it was the Assembly's response to one particular claim that surprised even Trump. Paul Hunter takes us through the reaction.
His Excellency Donald Trump.
It was the day the world, or at least the United Nations, gave a listen to Donald Trump and then laughed. Not with him, at him.
My administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. America's so true. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
Trump later said he meant it as a laugh line. Then again, given the rest of his speech today, it hardly matters. His main message to the world, mind your own business.
America is governed by Americans. We reject the ideology of globalism, and we embrace the doctrine of patriotism.
Sound familiar? Recall Trump's speech the day he was sworn in as U.S. president.
It's going to be only America first.
Echoed today in reminding the UN he still means it.
The United States will not tell you how to live or work or worship. We only ask that you honor our sovereignty in return.
It wasn't all America all the time. Trump ripped into certain countries for ill behavior, and he thanked North Korea for that summit and easing up on its weapons program. But with some delegates at times signaling dismay at his comments time and again, Trump slammed internationalism.
We are standing up for America and for the American people.
All of it less surprising than it might have been had he not said such stuff before, and because of that, the speech may well be remembered instead as that day Trump got laughed at in front of them all. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
We're actually watching another developing story out of New York, the latest in the Nafta negotiations.
The fact is Canada's not making concessions in areas where we think they're essential.
That is U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer today. He says there's still a fair amount of distance between Canada and the U.S. and signaled that if the deal cannot be reached by the end of the month, Washington may proceed with a Mexico-only agreement.
Ahead tonight on The National, an in-depth look at Canada's mental health courts. We'll take you inside one in Nova Scotia that's giving some a new chance at redemption.
First, though, how high can pot stocks go? Canada's are among some of the most valuable in the world, but are all those highs just a lot of hype?
And the desperation in the destruction. Tornadoes destroyed their homes. They have nowhere to go and no insurance to turn to.
Right now it's a race against time, but with everything that's going on, lack of money and lack of resource, we don't really know from one second to the next.
So it is less than a month until October 17th or 10/17. For many, it's the new 420. Of course, we're talking about pot, but legalized pot raises so many new questions, not just whether to smoke it or eat it, but if and how to invest in it. Right now, Canada has the world's most valuable pot stocks, but trying to figure out that market can make your head spin. So let's have a look at this. Tilray is a Canadian pot company based in Nanaimo. Now, last Tuesday, its stock opened at about $120. By mid-afternoon Wednesday, it more than doubled in value, briefly making it worth more than American Airlines. And then it just walked off a cliff. About a week later, it is worth less than before the roller coaster started. Now, maybe a lucky few made a mint off that brief spike, but most probably just held on for dear life. So how do you make sense of these wild swings? Well, luckily, our Peter Armstrong has a good handle on this. You need to make this make sense.
I can certainly try. Because, Adrian, at the heart of all of this is, what are these valuations of these companies really based on? You talked about Tilray, and it's a great example. And let's take a look at the three big Canadian companies in this space. And if you look at Tilray, even after that big rise and fall that you talked about, it's up nearly 1,400% this year. Canopy's up 535%, Aurora 300 and change, and every stock in the world. It's always a balancing act between the underlying fundamentals and some kind of a bet on a potential future. And right now, as you can tell, that potential future is one that's just clearly winning the day. I mean, just look at their market value. That's all their stock multiplied by the current share price. Canopy's $15 billion. Tilray was at 12, as high as 20. Aurora at 11.5. And these companies, with great promise, but very little in actual revenues, are being valued the same as, construction giant SNC-Lavalin, energy companies, Cenovus. Canadian Tire does $3 billion a year in sales. And yes, investing in pot and owning pot stocks has already made people incredibly rich. But analysts are warning, this isn't the first time that investors have tried to bet on the future value of something. I mean, think back to the dot-com bubble.
Right.
What's going on right now has happened before. It usually ends badly because human beings are not very good at valuing the future.
Okay, so you're talking volatility, speculation. Does that go away, though, after October 17th?
Some of the speculation will, if only because we'll start to get results and returns. But some of it will just shift to whatever's next. I mean, Canada's pot industry, it's worth anywhere between, I think, $4 and $12 billion. The global pot market, we're told, could be worth as much as $40 billion.
Well, I'd say this is a very real industry with a real market. We are going to have dominant multinational companies, and most likely several of those will be Canadian.
Okay, I have to know, how many times do people stop you and say, hey, should I be investing in pot?
An awful lot. And not just should I be, but what do I do with my investments that are already there? I mean, the guy that runs the local corner store has invested all of his money in pot stocks. So this isn't just big hedge fund managers. This is mom and pop investors that investing in an incredibly volatile time, an incredibly volatile industry.
Yikes. Okay, Peter, thanks very much.
You bet.
Ahead tonight on The National, an in-depth look at a special court in Nova Scotia that focuses on the mental health of the accused. Tonight we'll give you rare access to the people involved on both sides.
Did you ever really feel like, if I don't live up to this, then back I go to jail? Like, did you really take them seriously when they said that?
Yes, this isn't some, slap on the wrist romper room thing. This is the real deal. And the expectations are there for me to stay at this level.
On average, someone dies in an interaction with Canadian police every 2 weeks. Earlier this season, a CBC News investigation found that in the vast majority of those cases, the person who died suffered from mental health issues or addiction. The investigation didn't end there. Since then, our team has been looking at what's being tried to bring those numbers down, and that brings us to tonight's story. It's about Canada's mental health courts. They exist in some form in nearly every province, but you may never have heard of them. The CBC's Diana Swain is about to change that.
I cannot say how lucky I was that nobody got hurt. Not just me, but I mean, I didn't kill or hurt anybody else.
Tommy Abriel says he doesn't even remember aimlessly driving around Halifax that night 2 years ago. He'd swallowed alcohol and Ativan before bed, hoping it would knock him out.
Somebody saw me wandering around out there in a haze.
He was sleep deprived, high, and as would soon become apparent to the officers who arrested him, he was not well.
And my next cognizant memory was being on the floor at the Halifax police station with the 2 officers on top of me trying to help me not injure myself.
Tommy has struggled most of his life with mental health problems, including severe anxiety. But the sudden death of his 20-year-old daughter, Alicia, is what he says pushed him to soothe himself with drugs and booze.
Cannot begin to describe how low that I felt. And I just knew that I need something to bring me up to normal. Not to get high, but I just want to have a normal life like everybody else.
For the first time in his life, his mental health problems had him facing the prospect of jail. But his case was moved to a specialized court, one that finally forced him to get the intensive mental health support he needed.
I had no idea of a court for mental health people. I had no idea.
Judges in Canada don't typically allow cameras in their courtrooms, but Nova Scotia Chief Judge Pamela Williams agreed to let us in to show what happens in her mental health court and why she believes it's a better answer than sending some people into the general court system.
All rise.
What happens in this room carries the same legal weight as a regular court, but that's about where the similarity ends.
Good afternoon.
You don't typically see artwork on the walls donated by those who've appeared in court. And note that slogan over the judge's head, letting people know that just because you have a past does not mean you have no future.
We have not done a particularly great job in the traditional system with some folks that have severe mental illness. They find themselves returning to regular court more often, not coming to court more often, being arrested more often, being in jail more often. How are things?
They're incredible.
People whose cases are moved here agree to take part in a program aimed at getting them well and keeping them out of trouble with the law. In Tommy's case, that meant he had to agree to regular drug and alcohol tests, any therapy the court recommended, and to show up sometimes as often as once a week to answer the judge's questions about how he was doing.
We take a more individualized approach. We get to know these people better, know what their circumstances are, what has led to them breaking the law, and then try to deal with the root causes.
She's aware of the data we reported earlier this year. It showed that roughly 3/4 of the 461 people killed in confrontations with Canadian police over the past 2 decades suffered either from mental health issues or substance abuse.
And I'm wondering if you see this as one remedy to trying to bring those numbers down.
Absolutely. Most people who come into conflict with the law are compromised, whether it's poverty, education, mental illness, addictions, or any combination of those things. They would be by far the majority of the folks that we see.
The judge, lawyers for the Crown and defense, and mental health workers meet often to review the cases and discuss which new ones they'll accept. But the criteria are strict. Even if they believe someone is mentally ill, they'll only take them in if the evidence points to a direct connection with the crime. It's a frustration for legal aid lawyer Kelly Rolette, who's been with the court since it started nearly 10 years ago. She says the restriction is leaving too many people who would benefit from the court's intensive programs without help.
The problem is there's so many people who are traumatized. There's so many people who are sexually abused. There's so many people who, all this alcohol stuff. But these people don't qualify for anything.
That's starting to change. The Dartmouth court is trying out a similar program for people facing jail because of their alcohol abuse.
So how long have you been living here?
I've been living here for about 10 months.
And what's it like?
That's not too bad. It's a good place for people in recovery.
Daryl Horichuk has been living in this treatment facility, ironically on the same street where he says he spent his worst days.
I've been homeless here. I've actually pushed a cart down Roby Street at one point in my life.
Down this street?
Yeah, collecting bottles on Sunday. What are my options, right? I'm trying my best to get better.
He'd gone from having a job and drinking with friends on the weekends to skin and bones and drinking virtually anything he could find.
Like I'm talking about 40 ounces of vodka a day. That's if I could afford it, because when I've been in my grid of being on the streets, it's like Listerine and hand sanitizer.
Last year, drunk and desperate, he walked into this bank and demanded money for booze.
Have you been over that bridge?
He was now facing prison. After spending 7 months in jail awaiting trial, he became the first person in the court's pilot program for alcoholics.
So let us know how things are going.
Oh, they're going pretty good. I just got my driver's license, so
excellent.
That's a bonus.
Healthier than he says he's been in a long time. Daryl's now been in the program for almost a year. With the judge's permission, he let us film his court appearance.
What are the meetings that you're attending?
I attend NA, Narcotics Anonymous.
Yes.
And I also attend 7-step meetings.
Yes.
And then I also see like my counselors too.
Doing a great job. Keep up the good work.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Great. Thanks.
All right. Hey.
Daryl, how you doing?
Good, how are you doing, Tommy?
If you finish the programs without slipping up, there's a chance the charges against you will be withdrawn, as Tommy's were. But we brought the two men together to talk about the court. They agreed the lure of a lighter sentence is part of the attraction.
Did you ever really feel like, if I don't live up to this, then back I go to jail? Like, did you really take them seriously when they said that?
Yes, because I, on more than one occasion while going to court, have seen people been ejected from the and I'm like, this is real, man. It's like this isn't some
it's not a joke.
slap on the wrist romper room thing. This is the real deal, and the expectations are there for me to stay at this level.
But does it effectively become a get-out-of-jail-free card for serious crimes?
Success is relative. What we've seen is that if they are reoffending, they're doing so less severely and less often if they've had the chance to go through the mental health court, because they've learned some tools to help to deal with stressful situations, and they've got connections to the community.
Tommy is back at work and using his love of music to keep him steady in rough moments. He knows his demons are always lurking nearby.
That 800-pound gorilla is out there somewheres, and I don't want to run into him again. And in order for that to not happen, I have to be diligent about keeping myself involved in my own recovery.
It's a recovery he credits to mental health court, something he suspects many Canadians don't know exists.
And Diana joins us now in our studio. So, does this work?
Well, as you heard the judge say, in her words, success is relative. What they found so far is that the people who are getting treatment in this court tend to reoffend less often than they might have without getting any help. But only about half the people who started the program in Nova Scotia actually finish. Others ended up being sent back to the regular system for a variety of reasons, such as not going to treatment. A study is being done next year at the 10-year mark, Ian, that'll give them sort of a wider scope of how well this is working.
And what about expanding this to other problem areas?
Well, you'd think that they'd be in favor of that, but no, and here's why. The lawyers and the judge that I talked to said rather than creating a specialized court for every individual problem, in their view, the real remedy would be getting more of this approach integrated into the general court system, finding ways to individually deal with people based on what their problems are, what brought them into conflict with the law. They think that's a better system than kind of pigeonholing things, try to fix the larger system.
All right, Diana, thank you.
Thank you.
Up next on The National, the weary residents of Gatineau, Quebec. First, a tornado damaged their homes. Today, rain made ruin of much of what was left.
As you can tell already here on the floor, it's already beginning to show on the floor. Starting to leak already right here through cracks.
First, so Deb Haaland could soon make history as the first Native American woman elected to the U.S. Congress. Kim Brunhuber will take us inside her campaign tomorrow night. Here's a preview.
I just want to let you know that I am who I am. I'm who I am.
She's a 35th generation New Mexican from the Pueblo of Laguna, a native tribe located about 50 kilometers west of Albuquerque. The longtime Democratic organizer says she woke up one day after the 26 election expecting to see the first woman president. When that didn't happen, Helen says, she got going.
And just want to let you know that I'll be out there every step of the way. I'm an organizer at heart.
Now she'll be harnessing those skills as an organizer to get out the vote for her own campaign.
Your campaign slogan, "Be Fierce." Explain.
Sure. Well, I don't think we can back down now. We have to fight for our values. It's clear.
No deterrent to stop them from doing it. Like, you can murder somebody and end up in a healing lodge.
That's for Father Tory Stafford. Angry, one of the people who killed his daughter was transferred from prison to an Indigenous healing lodge. Terry Lynn McClintock is serving a life sentence. In 2009, she lured Stafford to her boyfriend Michael Rafferty's car. Rafferty sexually assaulted the 8-year-old and buried her body in a farmer's field. It's not clear why McClintock was moved, but Corrections Canada says non-Indigenous offenders can live there.
Treatment benefits are not to be provided to a veteran's family member who is incarcerated in a federal facility.
A change in policy means convicted killer Christopher Garnier may no longer receive mental health care from Veterans Affairs. The 30-year-old was convicted of second-degree murder in the death of an off-duty police officer, Catherine Campbell, in 2015. Garnier claimed he developed PTSD as a result of the murder. Because his father served with the Canadian Forces, Ottawa would foot the bill for treatment. Veterans Affairs wouldn't comment today on Garnier's case. An assault charge against former Jays pitcher Roberto Osuna has been withdrawn. The 23-year-old agreed to a peace bond and has been ordered to stay away from the mother of his child. Osuna was charged last May and then suspended for 75 games without pay for violating the league's domestic violence policy. He was later traded to the Houston Astros.
It turns out Friday's storm around the nation's capital produced even more twisters than originally thought. Today, Environment Canada said a total of 6 tornadoes touched down on Friday, 3 of them in eastern Ontario, 3 others in western Quebec. One of the newly identified tornadoes hit Val-de-Bois, Quebec, about 90 kilometers north of Ottawa. Another even further north near Mont-Laurier. But none packed the punch of the EF3 monster that tore through Dunrobin, Ontario, and then Gatineau, Quebec. And so today in Gatineau, demolition crews moved in to start tearing down apartment buildings just too damaged to repair. It's not yet clear how many will have to go, but what is growing clear, hundreds of families who once lived in those buildings now have no home and no place to go, and even worse, no insurance to cover their losses. Katie Simpson has more on that.
Rain is adding to the misery of the people who have already suffered so much. Tornado-damaged apartments in this lower-income Quebec neighborhood are slowly becoming waterlogged. Household items that may have been salvageable are now ruined.
Has anyone told you it's unsafe?
They have told us, but then all of a sudden now it's considered safe. I don't even understand, to be honest. I don't understand how a building that's looking like this can go from unsafe to safe all of a sudden.
David Bergevin lived here in a second-floor unit with his girlfriend and 13-year-old stepson. They don't have renter's insurance and are afraid water damage will now destroy everything they own.
As you can tell already, here on the floor, it's already beginning to show on the floor. Starting to leak already right here through cracks.
The family can't afford a storage unit or a moving truck. And if all of that isn't difficult enough, more bad news arrives by email.
We need to clear the building as quick as possible because they need to do whatever it is that they're going to be doing.
How are you doing?
Ha!
That just made us feel worse.
It just made a difficult situation even more stressful.
If they don't have insurance, they are, at the good graces of governments, the Red Cross, and any donations that the community can provide to support them.
Many families are in this exact same predicament. So the Red Cross organized meetings today to offer advice and planning for the days and weeks ahead.
City is telling us that there are apartments in and around town. The thing is a matter of price. Will we find enough apartment at reasonable price? That's the challenge, and I don't have the answer yet. City is working on this.
Finding an affordable place to live is now the Bergevin family's priority.
Right now it's a race against time, but with everything that's going on, lack of money and lack of resource, we don't really know from one second to the next.
The only thing they can do for now is hope their luck will turn around soon. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Gatineau, Quebec.
You've seen a lot of images by now of the damage in the Ottawa-Gatineau area, but perhaps none like these. Take a look at this Dunrobin, Ontario home before the twister hit and then after. Another picture-perfect house in the same area and as it looks now. In Gatineau, tidy apartment blocks that house dozens and dozens of families are now uninhabitable. So here's the same Montbleu neighborhood area from high above. The ruinous power of the tornado still very clear to see. Up next on The National, our moment of the day. First, though, NHL hockey season officially kicks off next week, and with it, the hopes and dreams of newcomers to the league, including one from Philadelphia who has already made a huge splash, alternately described as absurd, bizarre, terrifying. Tonight, we speak in defense of the Flyers' new mascot, Gritty. Big, hairy, and orange. Gritty is, we actually don't know what he is exactly. Montreal Canadian mascot Youppi's hard-rockin' cousin. The love child of the Queen of Hearts, an animal from the Muppets. You don't see it? It's a theory. Anyway, since Gritty's big debut this week, social media has lit up with jokes, memes, and mashups, most calling him the stuff of nightmares. But is that fair, or is he, in fact, one of the most team-appropriate mascots ever created? Consider the subtle genius to his design, like the permanent shaggy facial hair. How confident is that? It's like he's so sure the Flyers will make the postseason, he wears his playoff beard all year round. And then there's his excessive physicality. Also apropos, don't forget, the Flyers were long considered the bruisers of the league, the closest thing the NHL had to the infamous Hanson brothers. Does not get more hockey than that.
For decades, Bill Cosby was known as America's dad. But today, this is the image the world saw. Cosby escorted from the courthouse, handcuffed, just moments after he was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in state prison. And while cameras were not allowed inside the courtroom, journalists and advocates were, so we decided to ask some of them what the moment was like, and their response is our moment of the day.
Mr. Cosby, any comments, sir?
The benches set aside for Bill Cosby, they were pretty sparse. There were just a few people there.
It was really emotional. Not only was Andrea Constant and her family there were so many survivors of Cosby.
When they gave the 3 to 10 years, the defense attorney jumped up and started talking. It's like he was trying to stall the inevitable.
Well, I saw him roll up his sleeves like he was about to be handcuffed.
And then they told everyone to to leave the courtroom, and then they handcuffed him privately.
And then you could hear all the cameras going off and the shutters clicking and people trying to get their shot of this brief moment.
I think everyone just had that moment of, wow, this iconic man who's worth $400 million is going to jail.
So incredible for them to be inside the courtroom, but still incredible for us to see that juxtaposition of him in handcuffs today, going to jail for at least 3 years, and knowing or thinking we knew, clearly we didn't, the Bill Cosby from TV, the affable dad.
And everyone who we interviewed there made the same comment. They all made that same observation about watching him quietly roll up his sleeves. And again, it's all sort of, the reality of this is setting in. There's a reporter who's been covering this who is tweeting, interestingly, that he's about to be issued 1 blanket, 2 sheets, 1 towel, 1 washcloth, a bar of soap, shampoo, deodorant, a pen, and a comb.
This from a man who is worth $400 million.
Absolutely. That is The National for September 25th. Good night.
Good night.